In a shocking twist, a tech magnate's past collides with his present when he discovers the truth about his twin sons, leading to a gripping tale of redemption, betrayal, and second chances. A 63-year-old tech magnate stepped onto a gala stage precisely as two youthful black doctors entered the expansive room, twins, exuding self-assurance and sharp intellect. When their voices resonated, the entire assembly fell silent, and upon uttering his designation, the man nearly collapsed. The profound truth they were about to disclose promised to dismantle every aspect of the edifice he believed he had constructed. Take a breath and immerse yourself in the narrative. The man stood at the periphery of the hospital room, his hands trembling as he gazed at the two infants, slumbering peacefully in their incubators. His complexion was pallid, his brow slick with perspiration, and a sickening sensation coiled in his gut. The nurse had just departed after explaining that his spouse had endured complications during childbirth and would require several more days to recuperate. But that was not what held him transfixed, unable to approach the twins just born. They cannot be mine, he whispered to the empty space, his voice cracking. The twins, with their lovely dark complexions, were unmistakably not his biological progeny. With his fair skin and blonde hair, the mogul instantly recognized his wife's infidelity. The betrayal cut deep, especially now, as he stood on the precipice of the most significant business transaction of his career, a merger poised to elevate his technology firm to one of the nation's most influential. A scandal of this magnitude would shatter everything. When Marge, his wife, had announced her pregnancy, he had been elated. At 35, he had finally felt prepared for fatherhood, eager to cultivate the family he had never known growing up. But now, gazing at these boys, who could not conceivably be his, all those aspirations crumbled around him. Mr. Whitman, a physician, entered the room, her demeanor composed yet empathetic. Your wife is requesting your presence. He nodded robotically and followed her to Marge's chamber. The sight of his wife, pale and frail in the hospital bed, should have filled him with apprehension. Instead, all he could feel was the searing sting of betrayal. My dear Marge, whispered her eyes brimming with tears. Have you seen them? Aren't they beautiful? Who is he? The man demanded, his voice low and quivering with barely restrained fury. Marge's face went blank with bewilderment. What, the father? He clarified, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of her bed. Who is he? Marge, understanding, dawned in her eyes, followed swiftly by horror. You think I know? They're yours, the doctors explained. This could occur. It's called mixed race twins. My grandmother was black. Remember I told you about her? He shook his head, unwilling to listen. In his mind, the timing was too convenient, the explanation too far-fetched. His company was worth millions now, and the merger would make it worth billions. Marge had access to all of it. As his wife, I want a divorce, he stated coldly. And I want nothing to do with those children, please, Marge pleaded, tears streaming down her face. They're yours. We can get a DNA test. Please don't do this. But the man had already made up his mind. Within a week, he had relocated from their residence and filed for divorce, leaving Marge alone with the twins. He offered her a settlement, ample funds, so she would never have to concern herself with finances, but with one stipulation. She would never disclose to anyone, especially the boys, that he was their father. Marge, heartbroken and still recovering from childbirth, had no fight left in her. She accepted the settlement and moved across the country with her sons Elijah and Isaiah. 28 years later, the tech leader stood at the podium of the grand ballroom in the Ritz-Carlton, surveying the expanse of faces before him. At 63, he was now one of the most influential figures in the technology sector. His company, Whitman Innovations, was a globally recognized name. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice commanding the attention of every individual in the room, I welcome you to the 15th Annual Whitman Innovations Charity Gala. Tonight we celebrate not only the technological advancements that have transformed our world, but also our commitment to giving back to the communities that have supported us on our journey. The applause was thunderous, the admiration in the room palpable. The magnate had meticulously cultivated his public persona over the years. The brilliant entrepreneur who had forged an empire from scratch, the generous philanthropist who donated millions to children's charities, the respected businessman who had never remarried, claiming devotion to his work. Few knew the truth. He had forsaken his wife and newborn sons nearly 3 decades ago, driven by pride, prejudice, and unfounded suspicion. Tonight I'm especially proud to announce our newest initiative, the Whitman Future Leaders Program, which will provide full scholarships to promising young students from underprivileged backgrounds. More applause followed his announcement. But the mogul barely registered it. His attention had been captured by his assistant, who was frantically waving at him from the side of the stage, concluding his opening remarks swiftly. He stepped away from the podium and approached her. "What is it, Lucille?" he asked, irritated by the interruption. "Mr. Whitman, there's been a change to the program," she explained nervously. "The keynote speakers have arrived early, and they're requesting to meet with you before they go on." He frowned. The keynote speakers for the evening were meant to be representatives from a successful startup. Whitman Innovations was considering acquiring a brilliant pair of twin brothers who had created groundbreaking software capable of revolutionizing medical diagnostics. "Can't it wait until after their speech? I have donors to speak with." Lucille shook her head. "They were very insistent, sir. They're waiting in the green room now." With a sigh of resignation, he nodded and followed Lucille through the backstage area to the green room. When she opened the door, he froze in the doorway, his blood turning to ice in his veins. Standing before him were two young men identical in appearance with the same strong jawline, intelligent eyes, and confident posture. They wore perfectly tailored suits and expressions he couldn't quite decipher. But what struck him most was how familiar they looked, like specters from his past, brought to life. "Mr. Whitman," one of them stated, stepping forward with an outstretched hand, "I'm Dr. Elijah Johnson. And this is my brother, Dr. Isaiah Johnson. We're your keynote speakers tonight." The names confirmed what the mogul already knew in his heart. These were his sons, the children he had abandoned all those years ago, now standing before him as accomplished men. And from the look in their eyes, they knew exactly who he was to them. "How did you find me?" he whispered, his voice barely audible as the room seemed to spin around him. Isaiah's smile was small and enigmatic. "That's an interesting first question from a father meeting his sons after 28 years. Don't you think the world, as the tech leader, knew it was about to transform forever? And there was nowhere for him to escape." He stumbled backward, gripping the doorframe to steady himself. His heart hammered against his ribs, and for a moment he feared he might suffer a heart attack right there in the green room. "How?" he tried again, his mouth dry. "How did you find out about me, Elijah?" And Isaiah exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them that spoke of years of shared understanding. It was Elijah who stepped forward, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp with intelligence. "Mom never told us, if that's what you're wondering," Elijah stated, his voice calm and measured. "She kept her promise to you until the day she died." He flinched at the mention of Marge's death. "Marge is gone 5 years ago." Isaiah confirmed, his expression softening slightly at the memory of their mother, breast cancer. "She fought hard, but in the end..." He trailed off, the pain still evident in his voice. A wave of shame washed over the man he hadn't known. He hadn't checked after the divorce. He had deliberately banished all thoughts of Marge and the twins from his mind, focusing entirely on building his empire. Even when his company had grown powerful enough that he could have easily found out about them without Marge ever knowing, he had chosen not to. "Look, I'm sorry," the mogul said inadequately. The words felt hollow even to his own ears. "Are you?" Isaiah's question was gentle but direct, his gaze unwavering. Before he could respond, the door to the green room opened again, and Lucille poked her head in. "Mr. Whitman, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're needed for the donor photos in 5 minutes." He nodded, relieved at the interruption. "I'll be right there." Turning back to the twins, he attempted to regain his composure. "We clearly have much to discuss, but this isn't the time or place. Perhaps after the gala." "Actually," Elijah cut in smoothly, "our keynote speech is scheduled for 20 minutes from now. We've prepared something quite relevant to the evening's theme. We think you'll find it illuminating." There was something in Elijah's tone that made the man's stomach clench with apprehension. "What exactly are you planning to say?" Isaiah smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "You'll have to wait and see, just like everyone else." "Don't worry, Mr. Whitman. We're professionals." The man felt trapped. These young men before him, his sons, now held all the cards. If they chose to expose him publicly tonight, reveal how the great philanthropist had abandoned his own children, his reputation would be irreparably damaged. The irony was not lost on him. A man who funded children's charities around the world, revealed as someone who couldn't even care for his own sons. "I have a right to know what you're going to say about me," he insisted, his voice lower but more urgent. "Rights?" Elijah raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice of words from someone who signed away his parental rights. Without a second thought, he blanched. "How did you find out about you?" Isaiah finished his question. "You're not exactly a low-profile figure, Mr. Whitman. Your face is on the cover of business magazines. Your name is on buildings. And when two mixed-race brothers with no father figure out, they have a genetic condition that runs exclusively through their paternal line. Genetic condition, his concern was genuine. What condition? Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Elijah explained it's a heart condition, mild in our case. But it required treatment. We needed to know our family medical history. So we did some digging. Isaiah continued DNA tests, medical records, and eventually court documents. The man felt the weight of his past decisions crushing down on him. Those records were sealed. Yes, they were, Elijah agreed, but were nothing if not persistent, a trait we apparently inherited from you. The reminder of their biological connection sent another jolt through him. Looking at them now, he could see himself in them, the shape of their eyes, the set of their jawlines, the way they stood with quiet confidence. How could he have ever doubted they were his? I made a terrible mistake. He admitted. The words forced themselves out before he could consider the consequences. When you were born, I didn't understand how genetics worked. I saw your skin color and assumed that our mother had cheated on you. Isaiah finished for him again. Yes, we figured that out. Mixed race twins are rare, but hardly unheard of. A simple DNA test would have confirmed the truth. But you weren't interested in the truth, were you? Elijah's voice hardened. You were interested in protecting your company and your reputation. He couldn't deny it. In his youth, ambition had consumed him, making him blind to everything else. I was wrong, he said simply. Yes, you were, Isaiah agreed. And yet look at all you've accomplished. Whitman Innovations, the charitable foundation, all this success. He gestured around them at the opulent surroundings. There was something in his tone that the man couldn't quite decipher. Was it admiration, resentment? Both. We've done well for ourselves too, Elijah added. As if reading his thoughts, Mom made sure of that. She worked 3 jobs to put us through good schools. She never let us feel like we were missing anything. She never spoke ill of you either, Isaiah said. When we asked about our father, she would only say that he wasn't able to be part of our lives, but that he had made sure we would be taken care of. The revelation stunned him. After everything he had done, Marge had protected his image in the eyes of their sons. The guilt he felt intensified, making it hard to breathe. And were you, he asked, hoarsely, taken care of financially? Elijah shrugged. The settlement was generous, I'll give you that. But money doesn't raise children, Mr. Whitman. He winced at the formal address. These were his sons, his flesh and blood. Yet they spoke to him as if he were a stranger, which he realized with a sharp pang. He was. What do you want from me? The mogul finally asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. Why reveal yourselves now, after all these years? The twins shared another of their silent communications. Before Isaiah answered initially, we were just curious. We wanted to see the man who had walked away from us, to understand why. But then we learned about your foundation's work with abandoned and orphaned children. And the irony was too much to ignore when the opportunity came to speak at your gala. We couldn't pass it up, Elijah continued. We've become somewhat well-known in our field. Your company has been courting our startup for months. Without realizing who we were, of course, his mind raced back through the acquisition reports. He'd reviewed Johnson & Johnson Medical Technologies. The name had seemed so generic that he hadn't given it a second thought. Now, the significance hit him like a physical blow. Your startup, he said slowly, the diagnostic software. That's you. Both brothers nodded, a hint of pride visible in their expressions. The software that can detect early signs of cancer with 95% accuracy, saving thousands of lives. Isaiah confirmed, including potentially lives like our mothers. Had it been available sooner? The door opened again, and Lucille appeared once more. Mr. Whitman, the photographers are waiting. Tell them I'll be there in a moment, the man said, not taking his eyes off his sons. When Lucille hesitated, he added more firmly, give me 5 minutes, Lucille, please. After she left, he took a deep breath. I need to know what you're planning if you're going to expose me tonight. Expose you? Elijah tilted his head slightly. Is that what you're afraid of? That we're here for some public revenge, aren't you? The mogul asked, genuinely uncertain. We haven't decided yet, Isaiah said, his voice neutral. That depends largely on what happens in the next few hours. What does that mean? It means, Elijah explained, that we're giving you a chance to do the right thing. For once, the implication hung in the air between them. The man's mind raced through the possibilities. What did they want? Money, recognition, a public apology? I don't understand, he admitted, feeling completely out of his depth. What is the right thing in this situation? Isaiah checked his watch. You're needed for those photos. And we need to prepare for our speech. Perhaps you should use this time to figure out what being a father means to you, even after all these years. Because tonight, Elijah added, his voice dropping to ensure only the man could hear, your past and your present are about to collide in front of 500 of your closest business associates and friends. The only question is whether you'll be standing tall when the dust settles, or buried beneath the rubble of the life you've built on lies, with that both brothers turned away, effectively dismissing him from their presence. The man stood frozen for a moment longer, then stumbled out of the room on legs that felt as weak as a newborn's. As he made his way toward the waiting photographers, a cold realization settled in his chest. For the first time in decades, he was no longer in control of his carefully constructed world. And his sons, the ones he had denied and abandoned, now held his fate in their hands. The man moved through the gala like one in a trance. He smiled for the photographs, shook hands with donors, and exchanged pleasantries with business partners. But his mind was elsewhere, trapped in that green room with the twin sons he had abandoned nearly 3 decades ago. As he mechanically performed his duties as host, fragments of memory assaulted him. Marge's face when he had accused her of infidelity, the twins tiny and innocent in their hospital bassinets, the divorce papers signed without hesitation. The relief he had felt when it was all behind him, and he could focus solely on building Whitman Innovations. "Are you all right?" The concerned voice of Cynthia Chen, his company's CFO, and one of his oldest friends, broke through his thoughts. "I'm fine," he lied, automatically forcing another smile. "Just a little tired." Cynthia raised an eyebrow, clearly not believing him. "You look like you've seen a ghost," something like that, he murmured, his eyes drifting toward the stage, where preparations for the keynote speech were underway. "The Johnson brothers are quite impressive, aren't they?" Cynthia followed his gaze. "Their diagnostic software is revolutionary. It would be a significant acquisition for us." He nodded absently. "What do you know about them?" "Personally, not much," Cynthia admitted. "They're notoriously private, raised by a single mother, who passed away a few years ago. No father in the picture. Brilliant minds. They both finished medical school by 24, then went on to develop their software. They've turned down multiple buyout offers from larger companies." She gave him a curious look. "Why the sudden interest in their personal lives?" "I thought you were only concerned with their technology." "Just doing my due diligence," he said, trying to sound casual. Before Cynthia could press further, the lights dimmed slightly, and the event coordinator took the stage to introduce the keynote speakers. His heart rate accelerated as he watched Elijah and Isaiah walk confidently to the podium, their matching strides a reminder of their shared DNA's DNA. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elijah began, his voice clear and commanding, "my brother and I are honored to be with you tonight. When we were invited to speak at the Whitman Innovations Charity Gala, we knew this was an opportunity we couldn't pass up." Isaiah stepped forward to stand beside his brother. "For those of you who aren't familiar with our work, we've developed software that can detect early markers of various cancers through a simple blood test. With an accuracy rate of 95%, this technology has the potential save millions of lives by catching cancers before they become untreatable." The audience applauded enthusiastically. The man watched, his tension momentarily overshadowed by genuine admiration for what his sons had accomplished. "But tonight," Elijah continued once the applause had died down, "we want to talk about something more personal. We want to talk about why we created this software." He felt his chest tight. This was at the moment they would expose him. 5 years ago, Isaiah said, his voice softening, "We lost mother to breast cancer. By the time it was diagnosed, it had already metastasized. The doctors told us that if it had been caught just 1 year earlier, her chances of survival would have increased dramatically." A murmur of sympathy rippled through the crowd. The mogul felt a lump forming in his throat as he thought of Marge suffering through her illness. "Without him ever knowing, our mother was our rock," Elijah said, emotion evident in his voice. "She raised us alone, working multiple jobs to give us every opportunity. She sacrificed everything for us, and when we lost her, we made a promise that we would do everything in our power to prevent other families from experiencing that same loss." He was surprised to feel tears pricking at his eyes. He had not cried in years, not since his own parents had passed away within months of each other, when he was in his 20s. Back then Marge had been his comfort, his strength, and he had repaid her devotion with betrayal and abandonment. "We've all been touched by loss in some way," Isaiah continued, his gaze sweeping across the audience, "and many of us have experienced the absence of someone who should have been there." But wasn't his breath caught? Were they going to reveal everything? After all, that absence can shape us in profound ways. Elijah added, "It can leave a hole that nothing else can fill, but it can also drive us to create, to build, to make the world better, so that others don't have to experience what we did." The twins looked at each other, another of their silent communications passing between. And then, to his shock, Isaiah's eyes found his in the crowd. "We see that drive in the work of Whitman Innovations," he said, holding the man's gaze. "A company built by a man who, by his own admission, has no family, a man who has channeled his energy and resources into technological advancement, and philanthropy. Murmurs of agreement sounded throughout the room. He stood frozen, unable to look away from his son's penetrating stare. Which brings us to the real reason we wanted to speak here tonight, Elijah said, drawing the audience's attention back to him. Our company, Johnson & Johnson Medical Technologies, has been in acquisition talks with Whitman Innovations for several months now. This revelation caused a stir among the business leaders, present, many of whom had not been aware of these negotiations. We've been hesitant to move forward, Isaiah explained, not because we doubt the business proposition, but because we needed to be sure about the character of the man behind Whitman Innovations. The man felt as if he were standing on edge of a precipice. One push, and everything he had built would come crashing down around him. We needed to know, Elijah continued, if Mr. Whitman's commitment to improving lives through technology and philanthropy was genuine, or just a public relations strategy. The room had gone completely silent, all eyes moving between the twins on stage, and the tech leader standing stock still among the tables. He could feel Cynthia's questioning gaze on him, but he couldn't look away from his sons. Tonight, Isaiah said, we've seen the impact of Whitman Innovations' charitable work firsthand. We've spoken with beneficiaries of the Foundation's scholarships, with children whose lives have been changed by the medical technologies developed here. And we've observed Mr. Whitman himself, not just the public figure, but the man behind the company. Elijah added. He held his breath, waiting for the axe to fall. But instead, Isaiah smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his serious expression. We're pleased to announce that Johnson & Johnson Medical Technologies has decided to accept Whitman Innovations' acquisition offer. With one condition. The tension in his body shifted to confusion. This was not what he had expected at all. Our condition, Elijah explained, is that our cancer detection software be made available at cost to public hospitals and clinics serving underprivileged communities. We believe this aligns perfectly with Whitman Innovations' philanthropic mission. Applause erupted around the room. He clapped automatically, his mind struggling to process what was happening. They weren't exposing him, they were working him. As the twins concluded their speech to a standing ovation, his eyes remained fixed on them, searching for some clue to their true intentions. When they stepped off the stage, they were immediately surrounded by admirers and potential investors, but their eyes found his across the room, and a clear message passed between them. This isn't over. The event coordinator announced a short break before dinner would be served, and the man seized the opportunity to slip away from the crowd. He made his way to a small private terrace off the main ballroom, desperate for a moment alone to gather his thoughts. But as he pushed open the glass doors and stepped outside, he realized he wasn't alone after all. Running away again. Mr. Whitman. Elijah's voice came from the shadows. He turned to find both twins leaning against the balustrade, their expressions inscrutable in the dim light. Why didn't you expose me? He asked, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Isaiah pushed away from the railing and took a step toward him. Would you have preferred that? No, of course not, but I'm confused. You expected public humiliation, not a business deal. Elijah finished for him. He nodded slowly. I don't understand what you want from me. What we want, Isaiah said, his voice now carrying an edge that hadn't been present during the speech, is justice, but not the kind you're thinking of. We're not interested in destroying you, Mr. Whitman. Elijah added. That wouldn't bring our mother back. It wouldn't change the past. Then what is this about? The tech leader asked, genuinely perplexed. Isaiah looked out over the city skyline, his profile so similar to the man's own at that age, silhouetted against the night sky. Did you watch our mother die? He asked quietly. He shook his head, shame burning in his chest. I didn't know she was sick. No, you didn't, Elijah agreed, because you chose not to know. You signed those papers, took yourself out of our lives, and never looked back. I made a terrible mistake. The man admitted the words, feeling woefully inadequate. Yes, you did, Isaiah concurred. But the mistake wasn't just abandoning us, it was abandoning yourself, the part of you that could have been a father, a husband, a human being capable of love and vulnerability. The assessment struck him like a physical blow. In all his years of success, no one had spoken to him with such brutal honesty. So what happens now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elijah glanced at his watch. Now we go back inside, we have dinner, we play our parts, and tomorrow morning you, Isaiah, and I will meet in your office to discuss the real terms of our arrangement. The real terms, he echoed. Isaiah's smile was enigmatic. You didn't think it was just about making our software available to the underprivileged, did you? That was for the audience. Our private terms are somewhat more personal. Before he could ask for clarification, the event Coordinator's voice called through the open door. Mr. Whitman, we're ready to begin dinner service. We'll be right there, he called back, not taking his eyes off his sons. Just give us 1 minute. As the coordinator retreated, he took a deep breath. Whatever you want, money, positions in the company, public acknowledgement. I'm prepared to negotiate. The twins exchanged a look, and then both laughed, a sound so unexpected that the man took a step back. Oh, Mr. Whitman, Elijah said, shaking his head. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't a negotiation. This is a reckoning. With that cryptic statement hanging in the air, the twins moved past him toward the door, leaving the man alone on the terrace, with the growing realization that his past had not just caught up with him, it was about to demand payment in full. The remainder of the gale passed in a blur for the tech leader. He went through the motions, making small talk, accepting congratulations on the acquisition announcement, smiling for photographs, but his mind kept returning to his son's words on the terrace. A reckoning asterisk. What exactly did they have planned? As the evening finally drew to a close, he found himself watching the twins from across the room. They moved with easy confidence among his colleagues and friends. Charming. Everyone they met. No one would ever guess the tension simmering beneath the surface, the decades of abandonment and hurt that connected the three men. Quite impressive, those two, Cynthia commented, appearing at his elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. She handed one to him. Their technology alone is worth the acquisition price, but their charisma is an unexpected bonus. They'll be valuable additions to the company. He accepted the glass automatically. Yes, they certainly will. Cynthia studied him with shrewd eyes. You're acting strangely tonight. Ever since you met those boys earlier, you've been distracted. Is there something I should know about this acquisition? For a moment, he considered telling her everything. Cynthia had been his right hand for over 15 years. She knew nearly all his secrets, except this one, but the words caught in his throat. The terms are a bit more complex than we anticipated, he said finally. Nothing to worry about. Cynthia didn't look convinced, but she nodded. If you say so. Just remember, I'm here if you need me. Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate that. He finished his champagne in one swallow. I think I'll call it a night. The car service would take him home. Whenever he was ready, he made his way toward the exit, deliberately avoiding the section of the room where Elijah and Isaiah were holding court. Tomorrow would come soon enough. The tech leader arrived at his office at 6:30 the next morning, hours earlier than usual. He had barely slept, his mind racing with scenarios of what his sons might demand of him. Money seemed the most likely answer, perhaps a larger stake in the company than the acquisition terms currently offered, or maybe they wanted something more personal. A public acknowledgement of paternity, a formal apology, some grand gesture of reconciliation that would make up for 28 years of absence. Whatever it was, he was determined to be prepared. He reviewed the acquisition paperwork, consulted with his legal team via early morning emails, and tried to steel himself for the confrontation to come at precisely 9 o'clock. His assistant knocked on his door. Dr. Elijah and Dr. Isaiah Johnson are here to see you, Mr. Whitman. He took a deep breath. Send them in, please. The twins entered his office with the same confident stride they had displayed on stage the previous night. They were dressed in identical charcoal suits, though Isaiah wore a blue tie, while Elijah's was burgundy. The only visible difference between them. Good morning, Mr. Whitman, Elijah said as they took the seats. He gestured toward. Did you sleep? Well, the question was innocuous on the surface, but he sensed the underlying mockery. Not particularly. He admitted, I'm eager to hear these real terms you mentioned. Isaiah settled back in his chair, crossing one leg over the other. We've spent most of our lives without a father, he began, his voice matter-of-fact. Our mother did everything she could to fill that void, but there were some things she couldn't provide. A male role model, financial security, without working herself to exhaustion, the kind of opportunities that come from having a successful parent. Open doors for you. Despite that, Elijah continued, we've done well for ourselves. We put ourselves through college and medical school, with scholarships and student loans. We built our company from nothing, with no family connections or inheritance to help us. The man nodded, a strange mixture of shame and pride welling up inside him. Shame for his absence, pride for what they had accomplished. Despite it, you've achieved remarkable success. He acknowledged, your mother would be proud. She was, Isaiah said simply. And now we're in a position to ensure her legacy continues. What do you mean? He asked, leaning forward slightly. Elijah removed a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the desk between them. These are our terms for the acquisition. The price remains as discussed. We're not looking to extort you, Mr. Whitman, but instead of the standard stock options and executive positions you've offered, we want something different. He opened the folder and began to scan the documents inside, his brow furrowed in confusion. The Marge Johnson Foundation for Single Parents. I don't understand. It's quite simple, Isaiah explained. We want 50% of the profits from our software to go into a new foundation, named after our mother, that will provide support for single parents and their children. Medical care, educational opportunities, childcare assistance, career development, everything our mother struggled to provide for us on her own. He continued reading, his confusion deepening. And this second document. We want to establish a scholarship program for children of single parents at your alma mater, correct, Elijah? Confirmed. Full rides for deserving students who might otherwise never have the opportunity to attend medical school or pursue advanced degrees in technology. He set the documents down and looked up at his sons, genuinely perplexed. This is your reckoning? You want me to fund charitable foundations? The twins exchanged one of their silent communications before Isaiah responded, nah. Exactly. There's one more condition, a personal one. We want you to serve as the public face of these initiatives, Elijah stated. We want you to personally announce them, to be visibly involved in their implementation, to meet the recipients and hear their stories. In other words, Isaiah added, we want you to look into the eyes of people who have experienced what we experienced growing up without a father and see the impact of absence and abandonment firsthand. The man sat back in his chair, stunned. This was not what he had expected at all. No demands for money for themselves, no public humiliation, no scorched earth revenge. Instead, they wanted to turn his mistake into something positive. But they wanted him to witness it personally, to confront the reality of what his choices had meant for others. Why, he asked finally, why not just expose me? Why not demand personal compensation for what I did to you? Elijah's expression softened slightly. Because that's not what our mother taught us. She taught us to create, not destroy. To build, not tear down. And honestly, Isaiah added, money can't fix what happened. It can't give us back the father we should have had all those years. But it can prevent other children from experiencing what we did. It can give other single parents the support our mother never had. The man felt something shift inside him, a wall beginning to crumble, a hard shell of self-protection starting to crack. Your mother, he said quietly. She really never spoke ill of me. Never, Elijah confirmed, even when we found the divorce papers after her death, even when we realized you had abandoned us because you couldn't believe we were yours. She had left a letter explaining that you were a good man who had made a terrible mistake. She forgave you, Isaiah said, his voice catching slightly. We're still working on that part. The admission hit him like a physical blow. Marge had forgiven him even after everything he had done. And these young men, his sons, were offering him not punishment, but redemption, a chance to make something meaningful out of his greatest failure. There's one more thing, Elijah said, reaching into his briefcase again. He withdrew a small velvet box and placed it on the desk beside the documents. This was our mother's. She wanted you to have it if we ever found you. With trembling fingers, he opened the box. Inside was a simple gold wedding band, the one he had given Marge on their wedding day. Attached to it was a small handwritten note in Marge's elegant script. For Richard, some circles remain unbroken, even when we think they're severed forever. His vision blurred as tears filled his eyes. For the second time in 24 hours, he had not wept in years, had not allowed himself that vulnerability. But now, faced with the evidence of Marge's enduring grace and his son's unexpected mercy, the dam broke. I'm sorry. He managed his voice, choked with emotion. I'm so sorry for what I did to all of you. The twins remained silent, watching him with inscrutable expressions. They did not offer comfort or immediate forgiveness, and he didn't expect them to. Some wounds took time to heal. When he had composed himself, he straightened in his chair and looked at his sons directly. I accept your terms, all of them, and I. He hesitated, then pushed forward. I would like the opportunity to get to know you both, if you're willing, not as business partners, but as family. The word hung in the air between them, fragile and uncertain. Elijah and Isaiah exchanged another of their glances, and the man had the sense that an entire conversation was taking place in that silent communication. Finally, Isaiah spoke. We're not ready for that, not yet, maybe not ever. He nodded, accepting the rejection, even as it stung. I understand. But Elijah added, his voice marginally softer, we're willing to work with you on these foundations, and perhaps in time. He left the sentence unfinished, but the man grasped at the small offering like a drowning man reaching for a life preserver. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, But it was a beginning as the twins rose to leave. Isaiah paused at the door. One more thing, Mr. Whitman. The board meeting next week to finalize the acquisition. We'd like you to introduce us, not just as the founders of Johnson & Johnson Medical Technologies, but as your sons. His heart leapt at the suggestion, but he tempered his reaction, aware that this was a test of some kind. Are you sure that would make everything public? Your lives would change. Our lives changed the moment we found those divorce papers, Elijah said matter-of-factly. We've had 5 years to prepare for this moment. The question is, are you ready for the world to know the truth? It was the moment of truth, the real reckoning they had promised. Was the tech mogul and philanthropist ready to admit to the world that he had abandoned his own children, ready to face the judgment, the whispers, the potential damage to his carefully cultivated image? Looking at the sons who stood before him, accomplished, principled men who had every right to hate him, but were instead offering him a chance at redemption, knew there was only one possible answer. Yes, he said firmly, I'm ready. Isaiah's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eye. Surprise, perhaps, or the faintest glimmer of respect. We'll see, he said simply. As the door closed behind them, he sank back into his chair. Marge's wedding ring clutched in his palm. He had passed the first test, but he knew instinctively that there would be more to come. The reckoning had only just begun. The week leading up to the board meeting was the longest of his life. By day, he buried himself in work, reviewing the acquisition documents, consulting with his legal team, and preparing for the announcement that would change everything. By night, he lay awake, memories of Marge flooding back. After decades of forced forgetting, he remembered their first meeting at a technology conference, where she had challenged his presentation with insightful questions. Their courtship filled with intellectual debates and shared dreams for the future. The joy on her face when she told him she was pregnant, and then the darkness that had followed his suspicion, her hurt, his abandonment. The morning of the board meeting, he stood before his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie with unsteady hands. The face that stared back at him was lined with age and worry, a stark contrast to the youthful arrogance he had possessed when he walked away from Marge and the twins. You can do this, he told his reflection, though he wasn't entirely convinced. When he arrived at Whitman Innovations headquarters, Cynthia was waiting for him in the lobby, a concerned expression on her face. Before we go in, I need to talk to you. She pulled him aside, lowering her voice. There are rumors circulating about your connection to the Johnson brothers. Some of the board members have been asking questions. His stomach tightened. What kind of questions? About why you're so eager to acquire their company when there are other technologies with similar potential. About why you met with them privately before the gala. About why they're receiving such unique terms. She studied his face carefully. Is there something you're not telling me, something that might affect the company? For a moment, he considered deflecting, as he had done all his life when confronted with difficult truths. But the time for evasion was over. Yes, he admitted quietly, there is. And you'll hear it all in the meeting. Just trust me one more time, Cynthia. She looked surprised at his candor, but nodded. All right. But whatever it is, I hope you know what you're doing. The boardroom was packed. In addition to the usual board members, he had invited the company's senior executives and the legal team handling the acquisition. Elijah and Isaiah sat at the far end of the table, their expressions carefully neutral, as they observed the proceedings. Ladies and gentlemen, the man began once everyone was settled. Thank you for joining us today. As you know, we're here to finalize the acquisition of Johnson & Johnson Medical Technologies. But before we proceed with the formal business, there's something important I need to share with all of you. He paused, his eyes finding those of his sons across the room. They gave him identical small nods, almost imperceptible, but enough to bolster his resolve. 28 years ago, he continued, his voice steady despite the rapid beating of his heart. I made the worst mistake of my life. My wife at the time, Marge Johnson, gave birth to twin boys due to my own ignorance and prejudice. I refused to believe they were mine because of their skin color. A shocked murmur swept through the room. Cynthia's eyes widened in understanding, her gaze darting between him and the twins. I divorced Marge and signed away my parental rights. I gave her a financial settlement on the condition that she never reveal my identity to anyone, especially not to our sons. He took a deep breath. I went on to build this company to achieve success beyond what I had ever imagined possible, but that success came at a cost. The absence of my family, of the sons. I never knew. The room had gone completely silent, all eyes fixed on the man, as he laid bare his deepest shame. Last week at our annual gala, I came face to face with those sons for the first time since their birth. Dr. Elijah Johnson and Dr. Isaiah Johnson, are not just brilliant medical innovators, they are my biological children. The revelation sent a shockwave through the room. Some board members gasped audibly, while others exchanged stunned glances. Cynthia sat frozen, her expression unreadable. I understand that this disclosure may cause concern among some of you. He acknowledged you may worry about how it will affect the company, our stock prices, our public image. But I've spent my entire life hiding from this truth, and I can't do it anymore. He turned to face the twins. Directly, I abandoned Elijah and Isaiah before they were even a day old. I missed every milestone, every achievement, every struggle. I can never get that time back, but I can acknowledge them now, publicly and without reservation, as my sons, and I can use the resources of this company to help ensure that other children don't face the same hardships they did growing up without a father. The man outlined the terms of the acquisition, including the establishment of the Marge Johnson Foundation and the scholarship program. As he spoke, he watched the expressions of the board members shift from shock to confusion to, in some cases, a grudging respect. These terms are non-negotiable, he concluded. If the board chooses to reject them, I will buy out Johnson & Johnson Medical Technologies myself as a private individual and establish these programs independently of Whitman Innovations. A tense silence followed his statement. Then Cynthia stood up, her posture straight and determined. As CFO of this company, I need to state for the record that these terms, while unusual, are financially sound. The projected profits from the Johnson software will more than offset the charitable contributions, and the positive publicity from the foundations will likely enhance our corporate image. She looked directly at him. I recommend that the board approve the acquisition, as presented. One by one, other board members voiced their agreement. Some were clearly motivated by business considerations, others by a genuine appreciation for the philanthropic aspects of the deal. A few remained silent, their disapproval evident, but not vocalized. When the formal vote was taken, the acquisition was approved by a clear majority. As the meeting adjourned, the man felt a strange lightness in his chest. For the first time in decades, he had spoken his truth. Consequences be damned. The weight of his secret was gone, replaced by a tentative hope that perhaps, just perhaps, something good could come from his greatest failure. After the board members and executives had filed out, only 4 people remained in the room. The tech leader, Cynthia, and the twins. That was quite a performance, Isaiah said, his tone unreadable. It wasn't a performance, he replied quietly. It was the truth, something I should have acknowledged long ago. Cynthia approached the twins, extending her hand. I'm Cynthia Chen. I've worked with your father for 15 years. And I had no idea. She trailed off, shaking her head in disbelief. It's nice to meet you, Ms. Chen, Elijah said, shaking her hand. And you didn't know, because he didn't want you to know. None of us did. I'll leave you to talk, Cynthia said, sensing the tension in the room. I'll handle the press release about the acquisition. We can discuss the other details later. After she left, a heavy silence descended on the room. He looked at his sons, trying to read their expressions, but finding them as inscrutable as ever. You did it, Elijah said finally. You told the truth. Did you think I wouldn't? He asked. Isaiah shrugged. We weren't sure. It's easy to make promises in private. It's harder to follow through when your reputation and business are on the line. I meant what I said. He insisted, all of it, including the part about wanting to know you both. The twins exchanged one of their silent communications, and then Elijah nodded slowly. We've reserved a table at Morton's for dinner tonight, 7 o'clock. If you'd like to join us. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an opening, a small crack in the wall they had built around themselves. I'd be honored, he said simply. As they turned to leave, Isaiah paused at the door. There's something else you should know, he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Something we didn't mention. Before he tensed, wondering what new revelation was coming. What is it? Mom didn't die alone, Elijah explained. She met someone a few years after the divorce. A good man named Barney Taylor. They married when we were 10. He adopted us legally, Isaiah continued. He's the father who taught us to ride bikes, who helped us with our homework, who drove us to college, and cried when we graduated from medical school. The man felt strange mixture of emotions. Relief that Marge had found happiness, jealousy toward the man who had raised his sons, gratitude that they had not grown up completely without a father figure. We call him Dad, Elijah added, watching his face carefully. He's still alive, still part of our lives. He knows about you, about all of this. And he supports your decision to connect with me, he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Isaiah's expression softened slightly. It was his idea, actually, he said, that no matter how many fathers we have, there's room in our lives for all of them. that parents aren't a zero-sum game, the simple wisdom of the statement hit him hard. This Barney Taylor had given his sons not only a father's love, but also the emotional generosity to seek out their biological father despite everything. I'd like to meet him someday, he said sincerely to thank him for being there. When I wasn't, something shifted in the twins' expressions, a barely perceptible softening, a hint of surprise maybe. Someday, Elijah acknowledged, but first dinner, just the three of us. As they left, the man remained standing in the boardroom, trying to process everything that had happened, the exposure of his deepest secret, the board's surprising acceptance, the revelation about Barney Taylor, and most importantly, the dinner invitation, a small but significant step toward a relationship he had never thought possible. He walked to the window, looking out over the city he had built his empire in for years. He had measured his success in dollars, in technological innovations, in buildings bearing his company's name. But now, for the first time, he was beginning to understand what true wealth might look like. The chance to know his sons, to be part of their lives in whatever capacity they would allow, to make amends for the years lost to pride and prejudice. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be public scrutiny, awkward conversations, painful memories. To confront the twins had not forgiven him, yet might never fully forgive him, but they had offered him something perhaps even more valuable than forgiveness. An opportunity for redemption. As he turned from the window, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Be on time tonight, and come prepared to answer questions. We have 28 years to catch up on. With a mixture of apprehension and hope, he typed back a simple response: I'll be there, and I'll answer everything honestly. That's a promise. Whether that promise would be enough remained to be seen. But for the first time in decades, the man was truly facing his past, instead of running from it, and somehow, despite the uncertainty ahead that felt like a victory in itself, the man arrived at Morton's 20 minutes early, too anxious to wait in his office or at home. The mater showed him to a private dining room in the back of the restaurant, where a table was set for three. He paced the small room, rehearsing what he wanted to say, knowing that no rehearsal could adequately prepare him for the conversation ahead. At precisely 7 o'clock, Elijah and Isaiah walked in. They had changed from their business suits into more casual attire, dark jeans and button-down shirts, making them look younger, more approachable. Or perhaps it was just the setting away from the formal constraints of the boardroom. You're early, Elijah observed, as they took their seats. I didn't want to keep you waiting, the man replied, sitting down across from them. Thank you for inviting me. A waiter appeared to take their drink orders. He asked for a sparkling water, noting with interest that both twins ordered the same bourbon on the rocks. Small details about them, their preferences, their habits, seemed fascinating to him, clues to the men they had become in his absence. After the waiter left, an awkward silence descended on the table. The man had faced down boardrooms full of hostile investors, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and given speeches to thousands. But sitting across from his sons, he found himself at a loss for words. It was Isaiah who finally broke the silence. You did well today at the board meeting. Thank you, he said, surprised by the compliment. I was nervous. We could tell, Elijah said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. Your left hand was shaking the whole time. He looked down at his hands, resting on the tablecloth. A tell I've never been able to conquer. He admitted. Your mother used to notice it, too, whenever I was stressed or anxious. The mention of Marge created another pause, heavy with unspoken memories. We have questions, Isaiah said abruptly, about you, about Mom, about what happened. He nodded. I expected that, and I promised to answer honestly. Why did you never try to find out about us? Elijah asked, his voice controlled, but with an undercurrent of pain. Even after your company became successful, after you had the resources to check on us discreetly, why not even look? It was the question the man had dreaded most, because the answer revealed the worst about him. The truth is, he began slowly, I convinced myself that you weren't mine, that Marge had betrayed me. It was easier that way to believe I'd been wronged rather than that I had done something unforgivable. But you have had doubts, Isaiah pressed, especially as you learned more about genetics, about mixed-race children. He nodded. I did, but by then years had passed. I told myself it was too late, that disrupting your lives would be selfish. He looked down at his hands again. The truth is, I was a coward. I was afraid of what I would find, that you had suffered because of my absence, or worse, that you had thrived without me, making my abandonment both cruel and pointless. The honesty of the admission seemed to surprise the twins. They exchanged one of their silent glances, and the man had the sense that they were recalibrating their expectation of this conversation at the gala. Elijah Said you asked how we found you. We never answered that question. He looked up curious despite himself. I assumed it was through the medical records. As you said, partly Isaiah acknowledged. But there was something else, something we found among Mom's possessions. After she died, Elijah reached into his pocket and withdrew a small worn envelope. He placed it on the table between them. She kept every news article about you, every magazine cover, every press release from Whitman. Innovations for 28 years. The man stared at the envelope, his throat tightening. She followed my career. She never stopped loving you, Isaiah said quietly, even after what you did, even after she married David. She told us once that her heart was big enough to love both of you in different ways. She was like that. He whispered memories of Marge's boundless capacity for forgiveness washing over him, always able to see the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. She wanted us to know about you, Elijah. Continued, not the details of how you left protected you from that until the end, but she wanted us to know that you were successful, that you were making a difference in the world. The man closed his eyes, briefly overwhelmed by the gesture. Marge had every right to hate him, to poison their sons against him. Instead, she had preserved his dignity in their eyes. As best she could. Barney knew Isaiah added about the articles about her feelings. He never resented it. He used to say that the heart doesn't divide, it's love it multiplies it. He sounds like a remarkable man, he said sincerely. He is, Elijah agreed, and he taught us something important. That people are more than their worst mistakes, that even good people can do terrible things, and even terrible actions can be redeemed through accountability and change. The waiter returned with their drinks and took their dinner orders. When he left again, the man picked up his water glass, needing a moment to compose himself before continuing. Is that what this is about? He asked finally. Redemption, maybe, Isaiah said thoughtfully. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just about knowing where we come from, understanding the other half of our DNA. We have questions about our medical history. Elijah explained. The heart condition we mentioned is just one. There are others that run in families that we should know about. He nodded. Of course. I'll have my medical records sent to you. And I should tell you that my father had early onset Parkinson's. It's something to be aware of. Thank you, Isaiah said. That's important information for us. The conversation shifted to more practical matters. Family medical history, his parents and grandparents' genetic traits that might have been passed down. It was safer territory, factual rather than emotional. And he felt some of the tension ease from his shoulders as their main courses arrived. Elijah steered the conversation in a new direction. Tell us about your work, he said. Not the public version from your website, the real reason you built Whitman Innovations. He was surprised by the question, but also grateful for the opportunity to share something of himself beyond his mistakes. I wanted to create technology that connected people, he said. Ironic, I know, given how disconnected I've been from my own family. But I truly believe that technology could bring people together across distances, across differences. And has it? Isaiah asked, genuinely curious. The man considered the question. Sometimes, when it's used right. But I've learned that technology is just a tool. It's the human intention behind it that matters, and sometimes no technology can replace being physically present for the people who matter. The twins nodded, seeming to appreciate his candor. What about you? He asked, hesitant, but genuinely interested. What drove you to develop your diagnostic software? The question opened a floodgate for the next hour as they ate, and then lingered over coffee. Elijah and Isaiah spoke about their work, their research, their vision for improving healthcare access. He listened, asking thoughtful questions, marveling at their passion and intelligence. It was nearly 10 o'clock when the waiter cleared their dessert plates. The conversation had flowed more easily than any of them had expected, focused largely on their shared interest in using technology to improve lives. It's getting late, Elijah said, checking his watch. We should probably call it a night. He nodded, trying to hide his disappointment that the evening was ending. Thank you for dinner and for the conversation. It meant a lot to me. It wasn't terrible, Isaiah said, the ghost of a smile playing around his lips. It wasn't exactly warm, but it was the closest thing to levity he had shown in the man's presence. As they stood to leave, the man gathered his courage. I was wondering, would it be possible to meet again? Perhaps next week. I'd like to hear more about your research and about your lives. Growing up, the twins exchanged another of their silent communications. Then Elijah nodded. Next Tuesday, same time, same place. I'll be here, he promised. As they walked to the restaurant entrance together, the man noticed a man waiting in the lobby, tall African-American, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. He was watching the three of them with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Dad Isaiah called, waving him over his heart, constricted at the word at the ease, with which Isaiah said Eda familiarity he had never earned and might never receive. Mr. Whitman Elijah said formally, "This is Barney Taylor, our father." The two men stood facing each other. The biological father who had walked away and the adoptive father who had stayed in another life. They might have been enemies, rivals for the love and loyalty of the twins. But as Barney extended his hand, he saw only compassion in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, as they shook hands, putting all the emotion he could into those two simple words, "for everything you've done for them." Barney's grip was firm, his gaze steady. "They're remarkable men," he said. "I'm proud to be their father." The statement could have been a rebuke, but Barney's tone held no malice. It was simply the truth. He was proud, and he had earned the right to be. "We should go," Elijah said. "We have an early flight back to Boston tomorrow." Boston? He asked, surprised. "I thought you were staying in town for the acquisition transition." "We'll be back next week," Isaiah explained. "But we have patients to see, research to oversee." He nodded, understanding that their lives were full and established with, or without him in them. "Travel safely," he said. "And thank you again for tonight, for the second chance I don't deserve." "Everyone deserves a second chance," Barney said quietly. "It's what you do with it that matters." As the three men walked out together, the tech leader remained in the restaurant lobby, watching through the window. As they got into a waiting car, they were a family forged not by blood, but by choice, by years of shared experiences. He had no part, and yet they had invited him to the periphery of that family circle, not as a replacement for the father who had raised them, but as an addition, a biological connection. They were curious about, perhaps even willing to know better. It wasn't the reunion he might have fantasized about had he allowed himself to dream of such things. There were no tearful embraces, no instant forgiveness, no easy redemption, just a dinner, a conversation, and the promise of another meeting. But it was a beginning, a small crack in the wall between past and present, between estrangement and connection. A chance to know his sons not as the babies he had abandoned, but as the men they had become despite his absence. And for now, that was enough. If you've made it this far, thank you. I hope this story made you feel something. Comment where you're watching from, consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.